Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Talbot, Managing Director and Head of Research here at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on graphite today. This is a sector that I've covered since 2014. And you will hear from ePower Resources CEO James Cross. Now, during today's webinar, he will provide an overview and outlook, and then we'll take some questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we'll get to as many as we can. But before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this ePower Resources webinar, forward-looking statements may be made, and I would direct listeners to its forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of their corporate presentation. That can be found on the company website, e-powerresources.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I'd highlight this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors, and participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. So please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on ePower Resources. Now, with that said, why don't I turn the floor over to James Cross to speak about the company. James.
Hi, I'm James Cross, President and CEO of ePower Resources. A couple of important statistics about graphite. Graphite it forms the entire anode side of a battery or an electric vehicle battery. The battery has two sides, the anode side and the cathode side. The cathode side is the metals, and you probably hear much more about lithium and nickel and cobalt than you do about graphite. But graphite forms the entire side of the anode side of the battery. Another thing about graphite is about 2/3 of it, or 63% of it, comes from China at the moment. And following China, we have Mozambique, Madagascar, Brazil, and India, all of which are pretty far away from many of the electric vehicle battery manufacturing facilities being erected as we speak in North America and in Europe. In Canada, in Ontario, we just had an announcement by Volkswagen that they're building a very large battery manufacturing facility in Ontario, and it will be able to produce 1 million batteries per year. And if you look at that statistic on the cover page right here, a single electric vehicle battery requires or contains 50 to 100 kilograms of graphite. So that plant all by itself, if we look at current global supply, that plant all by itself could require 10 or 15% of global graphite production currently. So graphite production is going to have to increase in order to fuel these factories being built that have already had capital allocated to them, and construction on most of them has already begun. A little bit about graphite supply and demand, which is what attracted us to graphite. We got into this because we were looking for what material components of a battery are going to run into a supply crisis soon. And this research started in late 2018. The conclusion we came to, which is different than what most companies have come to, is that graphite is going to be the critical material to batteries to face a supply crisis soonest. Benchmark Minerals Intelligence recently estimated that by 2035, the world is going to need 7.2 million tons of graphite produced that year or per year. And currently, production stands in 2022 at about 1.1 million metric tons. That means in the next 12 years, graphite has to, or production of graphite has to increase by 6.5-fold. Now, what does that equate to in mines or new mines? That means the world needs 97 new world-class graphite mines producing by 2035. Now, we were talking about how these factories have had capital allocated to them already. I'll use North America as an example. And if we look at the fifth bullet on the left side of the screen, in 2021, North American battery manufacturing capacity stood at 56 gigawatt hours. In 2026, which is now only 3 years away, it's estimated to be 600 gigawatt hours. That is more than a tenfold increase in production. And remember, the anode side of the battery is formed entirely of graphite, and there is no known substitute. By 2031, battery manufacturing capacity, based on capital, in most cases already allocated, production is going to go up to, in North America, to 1 terawatt hour, which is about 17 times what it was in 2021. So we can come to the conclusion, the same is happening in Western Europe. We can come to the conclusion that the battery industry needs more graphite. Now, if we look at the production side, it will start with North America. There's only one producing graphite mine in all North America. That's a small mine in Quebec that produces less than 1% of global supply. The US has no producing graphite mines. So now the next place we look, what if there are a number of resources already delineated containing a lot of graphite? But in North America, there are only about 8 graphite resources of any decent size and grade that could eventually be put into production. And now in Western Europe, you see similar issues. Western Europe has, or just Europe in general, there's very little graphite production in Europe. Norway produces less than 1% of global supply. Russia produces about 2%, and Ukraine used to produce about 1%, but that's currently offline for the moment. And there's really no significant graphite production in the rest of Europe. So the graphite's going to have to come from somewhere, and where's that going to be? And they've already allocated the money to do it, or to build these factories that are going to require graphite. Now that if we conclude that graphite is going to be a problem for these electric vehicle battery manufacturers, or battery manufacturers in general, how do we make money on that? The strategy we've developed behind this is not necessarily a unique one, but in the graphite world, maybe not so common. It's a little bit similar to an exploration strategy in a gold company, a gold exploration company. We conduct research to find places we know there's graphite in the ground, or some graphitic rock in the ground. It may or may not already be a delineated resource, and we want to secure a land package around that area we know to contain some graphite. And then we want to delineate and develop a quantifiable graphite resource in that place, showing tonnage, grade, and its mineability. And we want to make sure that it's as turnkey as possible, so that a battery material manufacturer who needs graphite and can't find it above ground is going to be able to buy it from us with certainty it will meet their specifications, and also be a simple project to mine. So de-risk it as much as possible, and then monetize the project. And we want to repeat this process as many times as we can. In North America, very often, graphite was overlooked. If people were exploring for one thing, they may have found some graphite and said, "Oh, it's just graphite. Let's go home, or let's go somewhere else." Because graphite mining, graphite mining for the last 50 or even 70 years has been a business that's mostly taken place in low-cost areas, because it wasn't really possible to make much money on it. So it was often overlooked. There is graphite out there, but there just aren't very many delineated and developed graphite resources. And we want to bring those to the battery manufacturers so that they can secure some resources in the ground. At the moment, we have 2 mineral properties. For purposes of this presentation, I'm only going to focus on our flagship, which is our Tetepisca property. You can see where in Quebec it sits. And it sits in what is known as the Tetepisca Graphite District, which is the highest grade known graphite district in all North America. Now, to give you an example of how high grade, a typical graphite mine globally will produce at a grade of somewhere between 2 and 6% graphite, meaning 2% to 6% of the rock is graphite and the rest is waste or maybe byproducts. In the Tetepisca Graphite District, resource grades of 10, 15, and even 25% are there. So this is an area known to contain some very high grade graphite. And it is, again, the best or the highest grade known graphite district in North America. Now, it sits near the Port of Baie-Comeau, which you can see just beneath the flag on the map. And Baie-Comeau is, actually, there was an announcement made recently. The Quebec government is very supportive of the battery industry and has announced in 2020 a $7 billion plan to support and invest in the battery industry. And one of the allocations of that $7 billion is they are a government-funded company, or a Quebec government-funded company, is a joint venture partner in a recently announced new construction in Baie-Comeau, just south of our property, about 2.5 hours driving. They've announced that they're going to build a 200,000 ton per year battery anode material manufacturer. And if you remember, battery anodes are made up entirely of graphite. So that means that plant is going to need at least, and it's probably twice that or more, at least 200,000 tons of graphite per year. And currently that would be about 17 or 18% of global production required right there in Baie-Comeau, Quebec. Now, another thing about Baie-Comeau is it is a port with easy maritime links to all the factories being erected in Europe. Sailing time from Baie-Comeau to Hamburg, Germany is about a week, which is compared to, say, a Mozambique, where sailing time from Mozambique to Hamburg, Germany is 46 days. So Baie-Comeau is well positioned geographically to not only help North America, but Western Europe or Europe. And Baie-Comeau also has road and rail links to the rest of North America. So they need a lot of graphite in Baie-Comeau. The reason the Quebec government-funded company selected Baie-Comeau is its proximity to the graphite, its proximity to the Tetepisca Graphite District. They know there's a lot of graphite in this region. And Baie-Comeau is a great place for that factory for proximity and infrastructure reasons. This is a close-up of the district, and the mineral claims, which are the rectangular boxes there. You can see the scale of kilometers in the upper left. So what represents the Tetepisca Graphite District is a sizable piece of land, and E-Power has the mineral claims in red and in the dark gray. The red is red because those were the original claims we bought from a syndicate of prospectors, but the rest we've acquired all through staking mineral claims. And there are 3 graphite resources in the district, which are held by other companies, and you can see the grades there. CG means carbon as graphite. So you have the deposit to the north, which is 10 or 11% graphite, compared to the normal globally of 2 to 6. The one in the middle, 27% graphite, and the one on the south, 17% graphite. So this illustrates the the high grades that are found in the area. Now, before we ever came to this area, we knew the region, or we knew the region was known for graphite, and we knew that there were a lot of underground conductors of electricity in the area, and we knew them to be graphitic because previous exploration work had been done by other companies on the property. So we were able to stand on their shoulders and do our own exploration work. And graphite, the reason it forms the anode side of the battery is it is extremely heat resistant and extremely conductive of electricity. And one of the ways we can find it is to fly over a mineral property, and we can map with pretty good precision the location of the underground conductors, meaning where underground there's a lot of conductivity of electricity. And then we can traverse the ground or walk on the ground and find places where the graphite protrudes the surface, and then take samples of that graphite. And you can see the color here represents known conductivity in the ground. And then you can see where there have been samples taken in either, from the surface or small trenches, 1 to 2 meters deep. And in a couple of cases, drill holes. You see that the high grades, 27, 30, 16, 59, 21, some very high grade graphite samples on the surface of these conductive bodies. And this is a close-up of the southern part of the property. Again, the white splotches represent the conductivity in the ground. And you can see, yet again, and the scale of kilometers here, so you can see how far these conductors extend. And you can see the kind of grades that show at or very near the surface, 27, 52, 12, 12, 47. Lots of very high-grade graphite at and near the surface. Our exploration work done thus far on the property has narrowed us down to 5 different target areas. Now, if you remember, our business model is to show a graphite resource, de-risk it as much as possible, show its mineability, and monetize it. Now, our conclusions from the exploration work done thus far is that 5 different target areas on the property represent the possibility of a world-class graphite resource. And I'll show you just one of those target areas to give you an idea of what we're looking at here. But on this property, even though it's one mineral property, it could result in more than one world-class graphite deposit. Now, if you look at target area number 1 here, that color again represents conductivity in the ground. And it doesn't look very big. It's about 3 kilometers by 2 kilometers. But that alone could represent a world-class graphite deposit. And I'll show you what we like about this particular target area. If you look at the right side of the diagram there, you see the red, yellow, and green colors. That represents high conductivity in the ground. A nice box to tick, but it doesn't mean it's graphitic, just because it's highly conductive. Now, we know this to be graphitic. We knew it to be graphitic before we took on the property, but conductivity can represent other things too, like copper or iron. But in this case, we know that there is some graphite, it appears to be graphite anyway. If you look at the left side of the screen, it's a depiction of the same area. And the blue represents low magnetics. Now, low magnetics are important because one of the things that can interfere with the ability to purify the graphite well enough for use in batteries is the presence of sulfides in the rock. So we not only want to find some good graphite in the ground, some high-grade graphite in the ground, but we also want to find low sulfides in the ground. And you can see that the blue on the left side of the screen represents low sulfides in the same place. Now, these two things are not enough to say, all right, this looks like it could be a world-class graphite deposit. But on the next page, this is a further zoom in of the same area. Trenches have been dug on the property, represented by the blue and the red. And those trenches have, they're only 1 or 2 meters deep. And samples have been taken in those trenches, and you can see some very high grades shown in the red. It's a little unclear, but you see grades of 33, 35, 38, 52, 16. So very high grade samples after you just scrape a little bit of ground off this, or overburden off the surface. One other thing about graphite in this area is, if you look at the tan on the map, that represents a rock formation called the Nantes Formation. And in the Tetepisca Graphite District, if you're not in the Nantes Formation, you won't have any graphite. All the known graphite sits in the Nantes Formation. And this rock here is indeed the Nantes Formation. So all these things lining up, the low magnetics, the high conductivity, the at surface, very high grade samples, along with, knowing it's the Nantes Formation, lead us to believe this target area number 1 could be a world-class graphite deposit. Now, you can see target area number 1 here yet again, and then just 1 or say 1.5 or 2 kilometers away, there's yet another target area, which appears to be 2 parallel structures. And there hasn't been much geological work done on that area, but the grades encountered in drill holes, again, are very high. But it's only 2 drill holes. It's too early to know what this is going to result in. But one other thing about the target area number 1 I didn't mention, graphite, and just to illustrate how possibly special target area number 1 is, graphite is a sedimentary rock. So it begins as something accumulating on a relatively horizontal surface. And what that is life forms, basically, like leaves or bushes, carbon-based things that eventually became graphite because the earth, performed metamorphic events on it. So leaves, dead insects, trees, bushes became graphite through metamorphic events. And while it starts out as a bed, really, on a horizontal surface, what it appears to have done in target area number 1 is folded onto itself. So if you imagine a horizontal surface, which I'm showing with my hands here, but part of it is now folded onto the other part, a bit like closing a book. So the surface area is reduced, but the thickness is essentially doubled. So this could present a very convenient mining scenario. And then again, just 1.5 kilometers or 2 kilometers away, we have yet another potential target, which looks as though the bed has become, or the beds, graphite beds, have become 2 parallel structures. But more work needs to be done on that to see what's going on there. So, all right, what's our plan? The plan is, if we go back to those 5 different target areas, the plan is our next drill program, which should start in about 4 weeks, is to drill 3,000 to 4,000 meters of relatively short drill holes to determine which of these 5 target areas is most likely and most conveniently and easily going to produce us a world-class graphite deposit. Now, this is more reconnaissance drilling to choose which of these targets we're going to follow up with in terms of resource definition. So to take you about 11 or 12 months out, we're going to start this drill program at the end of June, late in June. We want to drill 3,000 or 4,000 meters. When all the assays come in and the data has been compiled, we're going to choose which of those target areas is our target for the next drill program to delineate a resource. And then in probably October, we want to drill 20,000 to 25,000 meters on that particular target that looks as though it could become a world-class graphite deposit. And that should be enough drilling to delineate possibly a world-class graphite deposit and put that on the books. And that would take us out to about April of next year. So in 11 months, we can possibly bring this company from an exploration company into a company with a world-class graphite deposit on the books. And if you remember, there aren't that many world-class graphite deposits on the books in all North America or even the Western world. A little bit about where we work. When we, in Quebec, the government is very supportive of the mining and exploration business as well as the battery industry. And they, when we put money in the ground, not raised flow through, but when we put, I guess, hard dollars into the ground on qualifying geological expenses or exploration expenses, we get 35% of that money back from the government. And it's not just a tax credit, it's an actual payment. And thus far, we have not failed to collect any dollars we've claimed. So to us, the system works. It is a beautiful subsidy and a way to, in a non-dilutive fashion, fund the company. The share structure of our company is a simple one. We've got just under 26 million shares outstanding. We brought it to the market just in January of this year and floated the shares. Before that, for over 4 years, this was a private company funded by private investors. And in January, just overnight, it became a freely trading stock. And we did not do it concurrent with a financing. Since then, we have done a financing and raised about a little under $1 million, 920 or something like that. And there are currently 2 million warrants outstanding at 60 cents. And currently we're doing a private placement at this is the hard dollar version, private placement at 32 cents, and it carries a full warrant to purchase yet another share for 2 years at 48 cents. So if we are able to, choose a target area, drill to choose a target area, then do resource definition drilling on that target area, and indeed come up with a world-class graphite deposit that everybody in the graphite world will know about because there just aren't that many. And and an investor has invested in the private placement. He's got a lot of upside because he's got not only his share, but his warrant. There is more to the company, but I'll leave it there for right now and open it up to questions and answers. But the one point I guess I'll ask you to take home is 11 months potentially from an exploration company to a company with a world-class graphite deposit on the books.
Great. Thank you, James. Great presentation there. So we are now going to kick off the Q&A portion of the webinar. Reminder to everybody online, you can type your questions in the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can. So we already have a few questions here to start, but maybe start with a couple macro questions here, James. Is there an appetite yet for graphite outside of China? Are the mega factories ready? You noted about 10-fold growth to about 600 gigawatt hours of battery capacity in North America by 2026 alone. Are they ready for anode material, or is that anode material going to come from China still?
Well, at the moment, it generally appears to all come from China. They may be able to scrape a little bit out of Brazil and Madagascar as well. Mozambique, I believe, exports all its graphite to China. So at the moment, that it is coming from there. But as this manufacturing capacity increases, they're going to have to get it from somewhere else because there just isn't enough to go around. Now, and your question was, are they ready for it? If they are, I think they're ready for it, but they're not making a big show of being ready for it. And I guess if you have supply chain issues, you might not want to make that so public. If you ever listen to Elon Musk about battery materials, he talks about nickel, which is, I wouldn't say everywhere, but there's a lot of nickel in the world, and lithium, much of which is located in the West rather than the East. But he doesn't really ever mention graphite. Now, there has been one instance that I know of a Western, I guess, manufacturer, Tesla, getting into the exploration business. They took on a few months ago a lithium exploration property in Nevada, which to me suggests they know they need to get some while it's still in the ground. Now, haven't seen them do that with graphite yet, but it looks as though it's about that time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you for that. With EVs, you mentioned 50 to 100 kilograms, so that's 0.1 tons, of graphite. Why don't we hear that much about this commodity as a cathode, as much as the cathode minerals? We hear about lithium and nickel and manganese, cobalt all the time, but why don't we hear about graphite?
Yeah, it's I guess a frustrating question for us because we want to hear more about graphite too. I think one reason we don't is the name of the battery is lithium ion. Now, lithium is like a tiny fraction of the battery. Like a battery with 100 kilos of graphite will have about 6 kilos of lithium. So it's not really. I think the name itself is one of those things that keeps it from being center stage. And another thing is graphite isn't necessarily unplentiful. It's just that not much work has been done to show resources, especially in the Western world. And far-flung supply chains, stuff coming from very far away, doesn't really work very well in today's world. Sailing time from Mozambique to Hamburg, Germany is 46 days. That's a long time at sea. It's no resources have really been delineated in the West, or not many, because graphite, before it commanded better prices due to, and before there was so much demand due to these batteries, was a thing you generally only mined in low-cost jurisdictions, like Mozambique or China or Madagascar. But that's going to have to change, because those countries just don't have enough that we know about. They're very far away. So, that's the situation there.
Okay. Now, your project's relatively early stage. You've got 5 target areas that show your potential, but you are relatively close to large, not relatively, you are close to other large deposits, and your graphitic, your geophysics and ground truthing are essentially telling you have graphite. So I guess what's the next step? Is it really go straight to drilling, and are you fully funded to do so?
Well, we have enough in the Treasury for a modest drill program for our phase 1. We have a private placement open now to raise another 1.2 million, and that would give us, a much more robust program, to begin in June. So we have enough to do what we want to do, but we'd like to do it. We'd like to do more of it. Drill, 4,000 meters rather than 2,000 meters in this first phase. We're looking to get fully funded during this private placement. And sorry, David, can you tell me the rest of the question again?
No, that was pretty much it. It's just a matter of getting to drilling and whether you were fully funded to do so. So it's really just all about drilling right now. It's otherwise it's too early to tell how much material is in these deposits.
Yeah, it is. We have to get, we see it at the surface. We know there's a conductive body that goes, well beneath the surface, but we don't know how deep it all goes. And, if the grades hold up at depth but it is nice to be able to walk on the ground and kick the graphite too. We know there's graphite here, but we don't know how much yet. And the drilling is really going to be what helps us quantify that.
Now, what can you maybe tell us about some of the local graphite deposits? And I know every deposit's different, but grain size or purity, typically more revenue is generated from larger flake sizes, and higher purity adds to revenue, removes from costs. Is there anything that you can tell us from nearby deposits?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have the very nice grades, and this Tetepisca Graphite District is known for good flake size distribution. Now, flake size is important. I didn't really go through that in the presentation, but natural graphite comes, in basically two forms, flake and amorphous. Amorphous graphite is more like an oily powder, and flake graphite looks more like a rock, and you can see the individual flakes in it. Now, both are used in electric vehicle batteries, but flake graphite leads to better battery performance. So every deposit is going to contain some flake and some amorphous graphite. And then the size of the flakes is also important. So it's a little bit less simple than gold exploration, where you have this many grams per ton of gold, and that's great because all gold is equal. But all graphite is not. So the size of the flakes in the graphite, which can be determined by sampling drill cores, is important as well, and will affect how much revenue per ton you actually get for your graphite. Now, we ourselves, we don't ever intend to go into the mining business. So we want to be a company that delineates, quantifies, develops, and de-risks resources in the ground. But if someone's selling it, that'll be somebody else, and we want to monetize those projects. So yeah, the flake size in this area is known to be good, and when we kick it on the ground, we've only done a little testing, and I don't remember all the numbers, but the flake size was good. But you can pick it up and look at it and see, 4 or 5 millimeter sized flakes, and just look at it with the naked eye. Now, more testing throughout a deposit needs to be done to say, look at our flake size distribution. It's really good, but this region is known for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely high grades are nice for mining and operating costs. And, the grades are not to be confused with purity or purification.
Yeah.
Grades being a percentage of graphite in the rock, whereas a purity is typically the percentage or the purity of the graphite itself. So do you think your graphite may need any hydromet or thermal upgrading to achieve higher purity?
Well, we don't know the answer to that yet, but if you remember in our target area, when I went through target area number one of our 5 exploration targets, we are at this stage looking for areas with low sulfides or low magnetics, which is an indicator of low sulfides. And sulfides are something that interfere with the ability to purify the graphite. So it's kind of a way of doing metallurgical testing, you could call it, before you've actually done metallurgical testing. We want to drill our source in a place that shows low magnetics, because that's an indicator that the sulfides are low. Now, this region in general does have sulfides. So, even though you may have a graphite resource in this region, if there are a lot of sulfides in it, it means that, some uses of that graphite may not be possible, and you'll have to perhaps sell it to a different market. But so it's something we've got in mind, and, we're looking to develop something with a low sulfide count.
Okay. Yeah. So tonnage, grade, flake size, mineability, the sulfides, I think these are specifications that are relatively easy to determine. However, I think those attributes and others are actually needed to be understood on the battery side of things. And every deposit's different, qualification required as well. Do you plan to do any metallurgical or physio-electrochemical testing to determine conductivity or expandability, and essentially dangle that carrot in front of the end users?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, first, simple flake size distribution is something we look at, and every manufacturer is going to have their own testing they want to do on something. Now we could, we can figure out what some of those tests are and perform them ourselves to, as you said, dangle the carrot. But very often a manufacturer, if they're really sniffing around for a graphite deposit, they'll pay for that. They're going to want to make, they don't really necessarily want our test. They want their test. And that's something, they'll pay for in general. Now, as you said, we have to get them interested enough to bother doing that. But it's relatively easy and shouldn't cost so much for them if they're really sniffing around for a potential graphite deposit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I just one or two more questions here. I guess in your strategy, you mentioned you want to develop your projects and then maybe monetize them down the road. Is your plan to be an exploration company? Do you want to do some development work, or are you really here to pass the project on to another mining company to get the product out of the ground?
Yeah, we want to be in the exploration and development business and monetize things. Like, when we look at, that we showed you the Tetepisca property, that property alone could host more than one world-class graphite deposit. So there are, just because it's one property doesn't mean it couldn't be monetized 2 or 3 times. But we don't want to become miners. And we also don't want to become what many graphite-focused companies have done. They want to show that they can make the best battery anode material. And that's getting well away from the exploration and development business. And if we're going to get into inventing the best anode material, we probably need to be doing private placements for $100 million rather than $1.2 million. So, and 1.2 is more our style. So, we don't want to become that. There already is that. And we've talked to, graphite processors, you call it, those who make graphite into anode material. And they say, we know exactly what to do with the graphite. We've been working on this for 10 or 12 or 15 years. We just need the graphite. And we want to be in a position to give it to them. Now, it could be a miner who comes in and takes it, but it could also be a JV between a manufacturer and a miner, or just a manufacturer itself. We want to keep the business simple. And, one of the things about the business model too is, I think in this business, graphite exploration, everybody's trying to become something they're not, like the anode material manufacturer. And they're getting well away from that exploration model. Now with gold, like let's say you're exploring for gold and you say, look, we've got 2 million ounces. You can hope a miner will want to add that to their portfolio, a major miner. But they don't have to. Their life is okay, But if you're a vehicle or a battery manufacturer and you've already spent billions erecting a factory, you don't, add it if it's convenient to your portfolio. You have to take on that deposit because there's nothing else you can do. So we have a more captive audience, we believe, than someone trying to prove up a gold resource in the ground.
Okay. Oh, keep it simple. Yeah, absolutely. So let's wrap it up there. I say, on the closing mark, if you're not producing, then you're likely not going to be upgrading the product. No plans to do value-added anode work, and that micronizing, spheronizing, purification coatings, and which you mentioned is well far away from exploration. And I'd say most miners don't know how to do that anyways. So,
right.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today, James. It's great to hear what ePower Resources is all about.
Thank you, and thanks to everybody for taking the time to hear about ePower Resources. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody else, for tuning in. Reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back tomorrow afternoon when Alina sits down with Eris Mining. So that's May 24th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.